And we're live. I am opening the show today because Andrew's in a car trying to do the show with us, so he's driving. Welcome to Andrew's channel, the Constitution Roundtable episode. I don't know, what are we, like 23 now?
Something like that. 24.
With me tonight is our host, Andrew, a.k.a. the Citizen 1776, and Mr. Constitution himself, Douglas V. Gibbs. Gentlemen, how are you?
Good.
I have electricity.
Show off.
Doug getting all fancy.
I guess you also think that we don't have any paved roads here in the great state of Tennessee, which we do, and we also have indoor plumbing.
Yeah, it's also the only place I know where you go golfing and you got to look out for the alligators.
Nope, I saw that. I experienced that in Wilmington, North Carolina.
That'd actually be more in Florida, not really Tennessee. I don't think we have any alligators or crocodiles.
So we got some fun stuff to talk about tonight.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, there's a. I wanted to start with a.
Well, let me start.
Go ahead. It's your show.
All right. Well, so I heard something.
No, we're getting some feedback.
Go ahead. Your show.
It's not on my end.
All right. So I heard something.
We're getting some feedback.
Go ahead. Your show. It's
not on my end. Andrew, what you got going on over there?
It's not on my end either.
Andrew, what you got going on over there? We are experiencing technical difficulties. Give us 1 second, everybody. Why is it repeating the same thing over and over?
It's actually kind of cool. It actually reminds me of dial-up.
Why is it repeating the same thing over and over? Well, someone's got YouTube open. That's why there's a delay. Andrew, do you have the YouTube channel open? I think he fixed it. He muted.
Is it better now?
Yeah. Well, that was fun.
Unmuted. Is it better?
Yeah.
It reminds me of dial-up.
I'm just an innocent bystander.
Someone did a Twitter poll last week or whatever and said, push yes or no if you've ever had one of these things. It's basically to show your age. And one of them is, did you ever have an AOL email? And I never did. I never had an AOL. Yeah. So I'm old enough to have had an AOL account. I just wasn't sophisticated enough at the time. And Andrew's going to say, what's AOL? Hey, Luke, great question. Now, we're not going to do that. I'm not going to cover the Erickson report on this one. What I'd like to do is get Michael on for a show next week and really do an in-depth and blast that out on all my channels. These guys aren't read in on it yet, so it would be kind of me doing a monologue. Now, we can't do that tonight. Luke's, Doug, you know Luke. Good friend, local activist, great guy. He introduced me to one of his Twitter buddies who's Michael, who's done some amazing research into Erickson and some deep history stuff. And if you get, I've been on a couple Twitter spaces with my buddies. Andrew.
No, that.
Anyways,
that was me that time.
Oh, so I've been on a couple of Twitter spaces with.
Yeah, you froze for a second.
Like that. The guy really, he's done it. In some areas, he surpassed. What's that?
Hey, you had frozen for a second.
Oh, okay. Well, I was saying that Michael had Michael. I've got a couple Twitter spaces with him, and just really geeking out on some of the dark, deep history of some of the deep state, CIA stuff like that. He's really done his homework. But this Erickson story he's breaking, I'm about 2/3 the way reading the report, and it's an eye opener. This is pretty darn good homework and research, and I'm really hoping to have him on for a show. Yeah, I heard about that. I saw a bit of that Laura Logan one. He was on with Laura Logan the other day, and I got on for the post interview spaces, and that was pretty good stuff for a bit too. I had my hand up, but I couldn't wait around to get called on. Anyways, Andrew, you wanted to start with something.
Yeah. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a rumor going around that I would like
You-
to address that the Chinese
Go for
balloon
it.
was. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
That the Chinese balloon was a signal to sleeper groups hiding in the United States from the south border to cause chaos and destruction throughout the United States.
Allow me to attempt to debunk that, or what I think should be debunked. We've had these attempted sabotages, these fires at the food plants, well before the Chinese balloon incident. Now that we do have reports of Chinese nationals being apprehended and getting across the southern border, and that's a little ominous. I was speculating the other day that the people doing it, if this is sabotage indeed with all these fires, and I will say the food plants very likely are the fires. It could be any one of a number of groups. It's not like the United States hasn't made a lot of enemies over the last several decades. But whether that balloon was a signal to sleeper cells, now, I mean, there's a lot easier ways to communicate with sleeper cells these days. You can just send them an email, for the love of God. As bad as, especially with all of our security people turned inwards and more worried a bit more about fake domestic terrorism. So now I think whatever that rumor is, I'm not going to pay a whole lot of heed to it, but it does bring up.
But the balloons are definitely more asymmetrical warfare. I mean, we'd be tracking, well, I mean, here's the funny thing is, I mean, let's say, that these balloons even did come from China or whatever it was, or however it goes. I mean, I don't know. I'm not gonna get into it just because it's, if the media is covering it, we should probably not. If that makes sense, because it's more than likely lies.
Yeah, we talked about a lot of it. Well, how the media keeps distracting us from the stories that really matter, and there is stuff going on that matters. There's
right.
There's some serious whistleblower activity with the FBI. When Merrick Garland goes and speaks in front of Congress and gives sworn testimony, and a whistleblower comes out the next day and says he's full of caca, that's Merrick Garland. If he had any sense of shame at all, would resign this weekend. But we know that's not going to happen. Josh Hawley really called him to the carpet. Shall I jump into Twitter files?
Yeah, no comment by me on any of this right now. I'm just like one of the folks in the chat room, just listening and hearing. But Merrick Garland still has a job. Oh, jeez.
Well, who's really pulling the strings is Lisa Monaco. She's the assistant attorney general.
Okay.
And if for those of you who don't remember, Lisa Monaco she was running the division of the FBI that hired, where Peter Strzok and all of the what do they call that? All the spying on Trump came from. Lisa Monaco was deeply embedded in that. She's a long-time Clintonista. She's a real piece of work. She's not the attorney. She's not the attorney general because they know she never could have gotten confirmed. Her record is too spotty. But she's pushing all the strings. The one where Josh Hawley really got Garland on is, Garland basically said that he was asked who ordered the raid on Mar-a-Lago, and Garland was trying to say that was a decision made by FBI on the ground, but we've got testimony from the FBI that basically they were pushing back against it, saying that's way too abusive, way too intrusive, and the order came down from on high to do a big raid. It was a political hit. Well, that didn't come from Garland. It came from Lisa Monaco. Now, do I know that for a fact? No, but I've watched Lisa Monaco operate for more than a decade. She's a very bad actor. But there's your Merrick Garland story for the week. So he got caught lying flat out, and it's even the Washington Post covered this one. So let me find his Twitter files and share the screen. This is a good one, and there's some big constitutional issues involved, which is why it's appropriate for the show. I am going to share screen. And this comes from our good friend Matt Taibbi. New Knowledge, the Global Engagement Center, and state-sponsored blacklists. I've been doing homework on the GEC for a while, so when I saw this as the first tweet, I got pretty excited. Are you guys familiar?
Not as familiar as I should be.
Well, you will be in the next 20 minutes. Taibbi does a pretty good job of explaining who they are. In June 2021, an analyst at the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab wrote to Twitter, "Hi guys, attached you'll find around 40,000 Twitter accounts that our researchers suspect are engaging in inauthentic behavior and Hindu nationalism more broadly." Why do we care about Hindu nationalism? We'll get there. The Atlantic Council is really interesting. The Atlantic Council, one of their members, that's a lot of Clintonistas are on that, but there's another one is by a guy on the Atlantic Council, a guy by the name of Dmitry Alperovich, and he is the co-founder of CrowdStrike. That is the same cybersecurity company that made the improper attribution of the Sony hack and said it was North Korea. Turned out not to be. They also were the ones who said that the Ukrainian mechanized infantry had gotten hacked by the Russia Fancy Bear and I forget the other one. That was not true. And CrowdStrike also is the one who said that the Russians are the ones who hacked the DNC, which may or may not be true, but we don't know because the FBI never looked at it. The other CEO of CrowdStrike is a guy by the name of Sean Henry, and he's best known as he used to work directly with James Comey of the FBI. So all kinds of fun little connections there.
Oh, that was weird.
What, those connections?
No, the stream did, because it completely kicked me out.
Okay, I was busy talking. Welcome back.
That's fine. I'm just glad the stream did not stop. It must have been me the whole time. All right. Anyway, what did I miss? Forgive me.
Well, I was just basically talking about the Atlantic Council, but I don't want to go back and do that. It was about a 60-second diatribe. Doug, any thoughts on that? Or are you enjoying the show?
Not so far.
All right. DFRL Labs said it suspected 40,000 accounts of being paid employees or possibly volunteers of India's, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, Bharatiya Janata Party. But the first was full of ordinary Americans, many with no connection to India and no clue about Indian politics. So basically, this is some kind of a group in India that Twitter can ban their accounts because they're guilty of some kind of terrorist activity. So what they did is they said a bunch of American accounts were these Indian guys and tried to get Twitter to block the accounts. Pretty lowbrow tactics. I have no connection to any Hindu folks, just a Reagan Republican here in Connecticut, replied one, Bobby Hailstone. A Hindu nationalist? I've never even been out of this country, let alone the state of New Jersey, said Lady D1816. And of course, these people are insane, which they are. Twitter agreed one reason many of the accounts remained active. Thanks, Andy, replied Trusted Safety Chief Yoel Roth. I spot checked a number of these accounts and virtually all appear to be real people. And of course, Matt Taibbi doesn't know how to make a Twitter chain. So DFRL Lab is funded by the U.S. government, specifically the GEC. Director Graham Brook denies DFRL Lab uses tax money to track Americans, saying its GEC grants have an exclusively international focus. Why is that important, Doug?
Well, why are we even involved in international agencies like this or allowing them to dictate anything?
Yeah, you remember when they said we have 17 intelligence agencies?
Right.
That we report, the reporting. Yeah, they got all kinds of these, and a lot of them have overlapping duties, et cetera. And they just keep authorizing more and more.
How many of them have domestic duties?
Well, theoretically, there should be only one, but they've been switching their switching their focus inward, and that's one of the things that the Twitter files are exposing, and that should be alarming.
Mm-hmm. And as he's looking for other stuff, reminder, because I talk about this in my classes all the time when it comes to the domestic operations of the federal government. This federal government wasn't created for domestic operations. It was created to handle external issues or disputes between the states, pretty much. And if you go to Article 1, Section 8, it says that the laws of the Union or to be executed by the militia. Number one, there's not going to be very many laws of the union that would be executed internally, domestically. And if they do exist, then according to the Constitution, the militia, which is basically community groups that are operating in sync with the sheriff and their state governments, are the ones who are supposed to execute those laws. And the sheriff, as a representation of the people, voted in by the people, and your last constitutional barrier against tyranny, if he believes that federal operation internally is unconstitutional, then he can refuse to execute it. So when you have all of these federal agencies, these policing agencies that are now instead operating inside the country, inside the states, essentially what you have is a standing army. When people hear standing army, they think of military personnel marching through the streets like you see in videos of China or the Soviet Union showing off their strength. This is a different kind of standing army. It's an internal standing army. It's a standing army being used by the government under a different name. And so these federal agencies are very dangerous and are not supposed to exist.
No, and they have definitely been turned against the U.S. population, as we've seen over the last few years, as more and more this is revealed. And you ought to be alarmed at that, because this is, well, next tweet talks about this. Another American on the list was Maricel Urbanik. She goes, this is un-American, and she immigrated from Castro's Cuba. She goes, they do this in places that don't believe in free speech, and she is correct. The GEC is usually listed as a State Department entity. It is not. It was created in Obama's last year. It is an interagency group within state whose initial partners included the FBI, DHS, NSA, CIA, DARPA, Special Operations Command, and others, who are all listed right here. So exactly what we just talked about. This picture right here ought to scare the heck out of all of us, because that's an awful lot of power.
JSOC or USASOC?
SOCOM, they said.
SOCOM?
Special Operations. Yes,
well,
SOCOM,
INSOC, yeah. Isn't that from 1984 by George Orwell? I'm sorry. By the way, Tracy, yes, he's in his car in the parking lot, a.k.a. a concrete bunker. But anyway, go ahead.
Long story, power outages, and probably...
Yeah. You guys need to hire better hamsters to run on the wheels and keep the lights on, man.
This state's a whole lot freer than yours.
Tell me about it. Unfortunately, I can't go anywhere, so we'll just work to change it. How's that sound?
Oh, it's well, honestly, eventually we'll get over here too somehow. So it's one of those things where we got to fix the mess, not just the little spill here and there. We got to actually solve the problem.
You know, the pendulum might be swinging the other direction. All right, number 10. GEC's mandate was to recognize, understand, expose, and counter foreign disinformation. We're going to find out that their definition of foreign is probably wrong. On the surface, it's the same mission for the United States Information Agency, another intel agency, that they fulfilled for decades, with a catch. The USIA focused on foreign disinfo. GEC's focus is wider, and they talk about Iraq and stuff like that. It's an incubator for the domestic disinformation complex. Think about that sentence right there. An incubator for the domestic disinformation complex. What does that mean?
Well,
we had all these government agencies for pretty much since Trump came down the escalator saying everything was Russian disinformation. Anything that goes against the party line was disinformation. And we had government agencies incubating that complex. And as we'll see later in this thread, where that information or their disinformation about disinformation ended up going. All the shit we pulled in other countries since the Cold War, some morons decided to bring home. And that's from a former intelligence source. GEC could have avoided controversy. I want to go back to that paragraph. You know, I talk about all the time about all the shenanigans the CIA has pulled overseas, you know, with all their color revolutions and stuff like that. But they've been using those same tactics on the American citizens and their political opposition. That is actually what's been going on. And once again, that ought to scare the heck out of you. GEC could have avoided controversy by focusing on exposing, answering disinformation. Oops, I didn't want to do that. Disinformation with research and a more public approach, as the USAI used to do. Instead, it funded a secret list of subcontractors and helped pioneer an insidious and idiotic new form of blacklisting. GEC asks Twitter to review 499 accounts as foreign disinformation for reasons that include using Signal to communicate and tweeting the hashtag Iranians debate with Biden. So the most innocuous things could get you on their lists. Thinking about, sounds like 1984 to you again, Doug?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah. George Orwell was a prophet. Here are 5,500 names the GEC told Twitter it believed were Chinese accounts engaged in state-backed coordinated manipulation. It takes about negative 10 seconds to find non-Chinese figures. And there's a list of the names. They don't look very Chinese.
What was that? What was it called? Hamilton what?
Hamilton 68. Yeah, that'll be brought up here. It's the same concept. Same people. They're all related.
All right.
This was a multi-agency attack on freedom of speech, and it was done for political purpose and to get rid of a certain orange guy, to consolidate power, to advance their agenda, which is government totalitarianism. GEC's Chinese list included multiple Western government accounts and at least 3 CNN employees based abroad. Not exactly Anderson's besties, but CNN assets, if you will. A total crock, added trust and safety chief Yoel Roth. So Twitter knew that these agencies were feeding them bunk info, and they were actually doing some homework and not just deplatforming everyone they were told to. But at the same time, they weren't sharing with the public that their government agencies were asking them to do this stuff. So you don't get a whole lot of kudos from me, Twitter, because this could have changed a whole lot of things in the national narrative. It allowed the left and the media to dismiss anything politically unpopular or to them as Russian disinformation, and their sheep would buy it, hoof and nails. How many times have I been called a Russian stooge? Hundreds. And how do you reason with people? How do you have a public discourse?
You speak to them in Russian.
Say again?
You speak to them in Russian.
There you go. I don't have that skill set. GEC passed some good information to Twitter, but mostly not. The root problem was exemplified by a much circulated 2020 report, The Russian Pillars of Disinformation and Propaganda. This GEC report was contradictory. On one hand, it offered reasoned evidence that a specific outlet, like the Strategic Culture Foundation, was partnered with the Russian Foreign Ministry, which would make it a true proxy site. The same report advanced a far lazier idea. Along with state actors, groups that generate their own momentum should also be seen as parts of a propaganda ecosystem. Independents, GEC said, should not confuse those trying to discern the truth. So that's a scary paragraph. Basically, they would anybody who said something that was politically inconvenient to them was getting categorized as, a foreign agent. Try to get through this a little more quickly. The ecosystem is not new. It's not a new concept. It's been with us since Salem, Massachusetts. Guilt by association. That's exactly what they were doing.
Yeah.
Just because I agree with for me, a great example of this is the Ukraine war. Andrew, who are the bad guys in the Ukraine conflict?
Both sides.
It's a good answer. I would say the U.S. caused the war in 2014 with the coup and the Maidan Revolution. And
the U.S. did a lot of things. So, for instance, what did not help with the Iraq war for all those years was the fact that we, in the 70s, gave, and the Russians did too, tons of military weapons to Iran and to, I believe, Iraq as well, and some other Middle Eastern areas. And then what did that do? That bit us in the backside years later. And then what do we do? And like you said with 2014. And then what are we doing now? We're doing nothing, giving them tons of planes, tanks, guns, everything that you name it. And it's like we're running out of surplus. England almost ran out of guns. Let that sink in. England almost ran out of guns by giving everything to Ukraine. Where are all these guns going?
Afghanistan.
Yeah, well, the
Ukrainian-
answer to who the bad guy is everyone except for the average Ukrainian citizen.
For the most part, people are always the victims of war. While the war profiteers, England running out of ammunition is a good thing for the war profiteers. The military industrial complex. That's why we have forever war. I mean, that's one of the main reasons. Also, it's a good way to controlling population.
I almost wonder if this war is actually. I'm sure we've said this before, but especially with like the gun thing, like if this is a way of gun running and like black market smuggling, because like seriously, like there's only so many people in Ukraine and all that other stuff. There's the UN that's involved. Like there's no way that big whole countries like England and like us should be, for one, needing to supply weapons and money and all that stuff. But how come they're constantly running out of money, guns, food, like all this stuff? Like, if you really think about it, like, where's it all going?
Well, didn't you hear the Pentagon said that they audited themselves and found nothing amiss? Everything was in order, so we can trust them.
That's an easy stroke of the pen. I mean,
When the government is their own auditors and their own oversight, you might have a problem.
Well, I mean, Doug would understand this more than any. Who do you typically have running the armory? A boot, right? A little E3, E4, whatever, running the armory. I mean, it's especially, if a commander says, "Hey, do this," they're not really going to question it, and even if and there's oftentimes that they're involved too, so I get, basically what I'm saying is that's not hard to oversee. So
the big picture here is, what are we doing with these foreign wars of adventurism? The United States military has no business interfering in this stuff. It's what I talk about with the CIA. What the heck have we been doing for most of the past century?
Well, and remember, we with the founding fathers, their attitude was that we shouldn't be involved in foreign. Why am I suddenly blanking?
Entanglements.
Yeah, foreign entanglements. Now, the idea was if it doesn't involve us, we ought to not be involved. Now, that said, obviously, there's going to be some things that happen in the world that may not seem like it has a direct influence in it, and it may have indirect influence. We may have to get involved, but getting involved doesn't always have to be boots on the ground or arms or something like that. One of the things that I said very early on with Ukraine is, how we can get involved and stop it? Domestic production of oil and other energy resources. Produce it like crazy, put it out on the market. Russia can't sell theirs. They've got no money. You starve them out of the war. I mean, there's ways to handle these types of things if you want to be involved, if you feel we need to, without necessarily pumping guns or money, or that's going to be laundered anyway, or other things into it. First of all. Second of all, sometimes there are foreign entanglements we got no business being involved in. It's a 600-year-old war between basically two ticked off tribes, essentially, that became countries. I mean, that's sometimes the case too. Not that I'm saying that's what this is. And so now the other question is not the war is not what is concerning, is the motive behind the involvement. And that's where, Brady and I have had a lot of conversations, and, you get back into, what was it, at FXT and, the different things like that.
Yeah, that's it. The assumption of whether we're going to avoid foreign entanglements fails to recognize that when we took on a mercantilist form of government and commerce, that basically is the old British system, and the Anglo-American rules-based order. We've taken on the role of the enforcer, but what we're doing is we're keeping parts of the world very poor, so our multinational corporations can exploit the resources. We topple governments that are unfriendly to our businesses and our politics. We install friendly puppets. These people are almost always corrupt. That has been the business model that England used for a couple hundred years when they became the empire where the sun never set. And we just sort of adapted that sometime in the late 1800s. And post World War II. Don't think the Brits aren't equally as involved, because their intel agencies are highly connected to ours, and the people that sit in the smoky rooms and make these decisions, that some of them are English and some of them are American, and they work together closely. And they've been, to be honest with you, they've been screwing over the rest of Europe forever, and the rest of the world. It's not a pretty tale, but that's kind of the moral of the book that I'm writing, right there. Okay, back. The ecosystem is not a new concept. It's okay. I said that as one Twitter exec put it: if you retweet a news source linked to Russia, you become Russia linked. It does not exactly resonate as a sound research approach. GEC sent Twitter a series of reports on a series of topics, often employing the ecosystem concept. Its report on France attributes membership in the Yellow Vest movement as being Russia aligned. And that was about as organic of a protest as you're ever going to see. You guys remember the Yellow Vest protests?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Those are just normal people, a little bit ticked off at the government. Wish we could see a bunch of insurrectionists. GEC's report on China was more entertainment value than anything, said Rodericks. It equates anything pro-China, but also anything against China in Italy as part of Russia's strategy, which makes no sense. Twitter staffers had professionalism, Matt Taibbi says. They tended to look at least once before declaring a thing foreign disinformation. This made them a tough crowd for GEC. Fortunately, there's an easier mark: the news media. GEC's game: create an alarmist report, send it to the slower animals in the journalism's herd, and wait as reporters bang on Twitter's door demanding to know why this or that ecosystem isn't obliterated. Twitter emails ooze frustration at such inquiries. Ugh, reads one. Basically what they're saying is we have a quasi-government agency creating reports, leaking it out to the media to basically completely hijack the public narrative. And your government's not supposed to be doing that. Twitter disagreed with GEC's alert about Russian disinfo in South America, which appeared to confuse cause and effect. As Rodericks put it, I believe what they mean is there was a surge in accounts that agreed with Moscow-aligned narratives. That equals Moscow-controlled. So right now I am Moscow-controlled because I truly believe that the U.S. is the cause of the...
Did he just freeze?
I think
war in
he did.
Ukraine. Must mean on a Russian
there we
puppet.
go.
Schaefer.
Yeah, you froze for a second there.
You froze for a second.
Sorry about that. All right. Did I mention the fact that I haven't gotten my paycheck from Putin yet?
I could tell your signal keeps going in and out.
Yeah, I have no idea why. I've got a good internet, and I've got a decent headset. It should be plugged in.
Oh, real quick before you get into it, I'm kind of kicking around, but my brother, so he has a professional podcast in the automotive industry, and he offered me the ability to use the studio.
Is he also Is he in Tennessee?
Yeah, but it would be rented out, and the timing may have to change if I were to do it. We'll talk offline, but that's a possibility.
Cool.
But we may need to.
Yeah. I just on Friday I spent a lot of time with our friend Christian, who came onto our show a few weeks ago as a guest, and we ordered up all of my new studio equipment. I've got a new camera, lighting, microphone. I'm gonna do a lapel mic, earbuds, so I can get rid of these mouse ears, and I got a green screen coming. So that should all be delivered starting tomorrow. So I'm actually going to have a professional setup.
There you go. So here's a thought I had. I don't know if this aligns or not, but it's something that still puzzles me. Like, granted, I haven't really been following close to Ukraine war because I think it's a fake war, in the sense of, I mean, the blood and the death is real. Like, I have a friend who's basically a brother. I'm just a brother who, is in the military, and for OPSEC, I'm not going to mention where he's at or anything like that. But, he's within areas, somewhere in Europe, and don't know where. It could be nowhere near, but I don't know. I'm not going to mention it. But anyway, so it affects real people. I'm not saying that this imagination basically is my point, but it's like why, why are we talking about this? Like, why is this even an issue? Like the whole Russia thing. Like, I don't know if it's because I'm not smart enough to understand it, but to me, it's like, why are we going through this? Like, why is this so important? Does that
Because
make
tyrants
sense?
demand it.
It's part of the global Game of Thrones, but why Russia is interesting. So Putin was the president until 2008, and under the Russian constitution, he had to step down. He was termed out. So Medvedev was president from 2009 through 12, and
Yeah.
that was the same time that Obama had come into power with Hillary as the Secretary of State, and they were talking about their Russian reset. The bad Putin's no longer in. We can work with Medvedev. Well, then came in the Arab Spring, and that's when our intelligence agencies were overthrowing governments in the Middle East, and we exported our inflation. Food costs got up, and then we started doing color revolutions in several countries there. Putin, who's still really running Russia, even though Medvedev was the president on paper, Putin was still the power, and he was very popular in Russia, mostly because he quelled the terrorism problem they were having in Chechnya. People started to feel safe again under Putin, and he had approval ratings in what's going on with the color revolutions, and they basically ended Skolkovo, which was the Russian-American cooperation. It was called the Russian Silicon Valley, where a bunch of Clinton donor American multinational corporations were working with Russia and trying to do joint projects. That got shut down by the Department of Defense, and that's where the bad blood came from, was the Arab Spring. So ever since then, Putin has been, Hillary hates his guts, and pretty much ever since then, Russia's been the fall guy for anything that we want to blame them on.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that I believe that they're necessarily good guys or that Putin is a good guy, but he definitely upsets the apple cart when it comes to what the globalist, progressive, leftist, we want a global reset, great reset kind of people want, because he's not playing the game. He doesn't want to be a part of that. He wants to be he wants to be a tyrant in his own little in his own little bubble, and globalist tyrants can't operate that way. There can't be a great reset if everybody's not willing to play along, so to speak. So once again, I'm not necessarily saying he's a good guy, but he's definitely not a bad guy in the sense of what the Great Reset and the global progressive left is all about, because he's outside that group.
Yeah, he's good. He is pro Russia, and if
Right.
America.
Well, let me say this, because Doug practically took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say,
Practically, huh?
well, I was literally, okay, maybe not word for word, but but literally I was just thinking, it almost seems like he wants to isolate Russia and just be his own little tyrant in Russia and just do his thing and not be concerned with, he doesn't want to be a part of a global, thing. He wants to do his thing and leave it at that. And, it is what it is. I think China kind of is the same thing. Like, China wants to just do its own thing.
No, they want world domination.
Well, yeah.
Here's the thing, though, is that they don't want to be co-owners. They want to own. Right. So it is different. And Russia and China reportedly are backing China's backing Russia. So,
I wouldn't be.
And a lot of people.
I wouldn't be too quick to believe any Western media reports about China. Xi Jinping may have changed a lot of relationships when he seized. Basically, he's the emperor now. When he seized all that power, don't necessarily believe of the China-Russia alliance. It's not as close knit as you might think.
You find any documentation that is wrong?
Yeah, I could find a lot of people who give you examples of why that's wrong. whether I can verify them or not, or any of us can or not. I'm just saying right now, if the Western media is telling you a story, take it with a grain of salt.
I mean, I always do, but that's why I'm actually asking. I'm genuinely asking you, is that wrong? Like, I'm trying to, find the correct information, to make sure that I am understanding the situation.
Okay, so all right, let's take a step back. I've gone over this on several shows, and I think I've done it on your channel. You got to go back to the early 1970s when Rockefeller stooge Kissinger goes over and opened the door to China entering the world of trade and the World Trade Organization. That was 1971. Nixon goes over the following year, and boom, China gets a seat at the United Nations. Taiwan gets booted off. That's the exact same period of time that other Rockefeller initiatives like the World Economic Forum are launched, where another Kissinger stooge by the name of Maurice Strong starts working with the United Nations. It starts the whole climate change scam. This all works together and was all designed decades ago towards this great reset one world order. China was part of that. Now, the only question is whether they're still part of it. Now, you look at the fact that we know China has compromising information on Biden, and so you can't quite believe the Biden people who are saber rattling at China. China can in a heartbeat take down the Biden admin anytime they want. They've got the information. Same thing with Russia. Yeah. So
somebody decided to jump into my lap. Sorry.
It's all right. As long as it was a dog.
Maybe he had an opinion. Does he have an opinion?
He probably does, but it's not going to match ours. All he cares about is what can I give him for his tummy and whether or not I'll pet him.
All right, back into the files. Roth noted that Brett Schaefer of the Alliance for Democracy, for Securing Democracy, remember them, the ASD, seems like the ASD are back at their old tricks. ASD were exposed in the earlier Twitter files. We've talked about them on the show. Roth was referring to the fact that ASD created Hamilton 68, another guilt by association scheme detailed in the Twitter files number 15. The Hamilton dashboard claimed to track accounts linked to Russian influence activities, but the list was largely made up of Americans. Your friends, Hamilton 68, Doug. The Hamilton 68 dashboard creator, J.M. Berger, was on the GEC payroll until June of 2017. Just before the dashboard's launch, Hamilton claimed the list was the fruit of more than 3 years of observation. Berger unequivocally denies working on Hamilton for GEC. The dashboard employed digital alchemy to create streams of headlines tying Americans to foreign disinformation. The ecosystem, reports GEC, and many disinformation laboratories feed reporters are just often subtler versions of the same thing.
Right.
I'm just reminded of the movie quite often of Wag the Dog. A lot of that was going on there. In a crucial, and this is what our intelligence agencies do. They talk about James Bond. They make all these movies, so you think Intel is all, all sexy and heroic and stuff like that. No, what they do is they're trying to get information, and they do it through some of the scummiest people in the countries they're doing it with. Quite often it's underworld figures, and the whole point is basically to spin lies and narratives. That's what our intelligence agencies do. It's what they do best. They're not out there. The original mission of the CIA was to gather information and analyze it, not to do covert operations and it starts spinning and changing the truth. That's how we got to Operation Mockingbird. I digress.
Well, let me say this, just because I know of one personally that was in this, but there's a little insight into how supposedly they collect information. So I know guys from the GRS, Global Response. Basically, they're armed babysitters for staffers and all that stuff in the CIA. So the people that are going out, these guys are in cars. Like, all right, the movie Benghazi?
I never saw it, but I'm aware of it.
Those guys are GRS. They're very highly trained. A lot of them were former SF or special operations, really, or just really squared away Marines or something like that, just really good, solid dudes. And into collecting intelligence, I guess, it's
Yeah,
it, go ahead.
some estimates say we've got 4 to 5 million people that have signed have national security clearance, and they sign these national security letters that are pretty ironclad. So if you even talk about what you're doing without great whistleblower protection, they can lock you up for life or worse. But we've got more than 1% of the U.S. population is actively working, against us to use real disinformation and manipulate things. And on whose behalf are they doing that for? And that's the $1 million question. Who do these intel agencies get their orders from? And it's pretty clear that it's the Council of Foreign Relations is one of them. And who started the Council of Foreign Relations? A bunch of oligarchs like the Rockefellers.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a British version of that too. It was called the Royal Council, RAIA, or something about international affairs. The RAIA is our version of the Council of Foreign Relations. And these people, these are unelected, multi-billionaires, oligarchical, multi-generational families that are controlling our foreign policy for their own, not just commercial benefit, but for their aims of, global domination, because they are the superior people. We're just the useless eaters. And that's the pattern. Makes you feel good, warm and fuzzy inside, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I remind people all the time, especially when people try to bring up things like term limits. Our issue is not the politicians as much as it is that administrative state, that bureaucracy, the deep state, those people that are underneath. And that goes on in the world as well. Of course, a lot of those people that are part of that in the world are your power players, your, Rockefellers or whoever. And it's a constant fight. And now here's the constitutionalist in me. Come on, PD, get down. I'm tired of you being on my lap. He likes to jump up, and sometimes I got to make him go away. But anyway, this goes back to an age-old problem we've always had. I mean, when you go back to what happened in America when we held an American Revolution and we divorced ourselves from Europe, what was going on in Europe? What did you have in Europe? You had these monarchies, you have these families that were controlling these countries. They were kind of related to, they're battling for power, they're battling for position. Now, where did all that come from? And you can definitely trace it back. This is the same problem we've always had. There is an elite, there is a power player group that wants to control everything, and they believe that it's theirs to take. Now, I'm not saying that I disagree with people who are able to gain power, or people who are able to do really well or become very wealthy and have a giant corporation. Great, more power to you. I have no problem with success and wealth and large whatever. My problem is when it becomes then something that colludes with government. It becomes this great collusion, and they become a part of that problem. And a lot of it is, for lack of a better way of putting it, it goes back to lineage. These are families. This is lineage that passes back. And Brady, you said what goes all the way back to the Roman Empire, actually even further, the Venetians.
Yeah, well, no, Venice. The Venice, we definitely can trace it through Venice in the 11th and 12th century and their migration into the royal families of Europe. But they all came from Rome. They were the nobility of Rome. We could probably trace it back to Babylon, but that's a little sketchier. So I start with the Roman families, their nobilities. That's a long enough history to show what they're doing.
Yeah, but I mean, when you look at World War I, for example, I mean, these guys were cousins and nephews and uncles and so on and so forth. It was family bickering. Or if you even go back to what was going on when it came to Britain, when it came to King John and the Saxons and the Angles and all of that. And it was different families. It wasn't about property as much as it was which family member of what family is going to control what hierarchy. This is just a continuation of what we've been seeing. And as my friend Todd likes to say, this is a cycle that goes on through history. Now it's our turn to go through it. That said, I am definitely not saying there's nothing we can do about it. There's plenty we can do about it. The problem is we have a society that for the most part is guilty of normalcy bias, and they don't know or care whether or not there's a problem.
Well, that's because they don't know about it, because they're taught the wrong history, because the people who are in power control the history books. and the education and the news channels. If everybody in the country knew what I know and and Andrew knows, this wouldn't be an issue. There'd be pitchforks out tomorrow.
Yeah,
but it's hard to make that case.
Well,
And
it's so important. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but that's why the show is so important, and what y'all are going to be doing and all this other stuff. And what I'm doing, separate from this show, is to show people, hey, this is what you've been taught. This is what is actually verifiably true, and this is not. And look who it's coming from, because there's people that are like, oh, well, I don't trust the government, but I trust these people, or, whatever. It's like, it's one of those things where if you don't trust one of it, you shouldn't trust all of it. Right. And, and I understand at the end of the day, there's good people in all these organizations, but it's one of those things where how can you not trust the, Congress and all of them, but yet you trust the FDA?
Well, yeah. If they lie to you about one thing, and then we know they've lied about many, how can you ever trust them again? You lose your credibility. The last thought on that, I follow on what Doug was saying about these families, multi-generational family oligarchs. It gets really scary when they do think that they're better than the rest of us. They think it's their divine right to rule, and they start getting these Malthusian and technocratic worldviews that specifically state that we've got a population problem. They're not talking about them. They want the resources for themselves, not us.
right.
And
In other words, the population problem is there's too many of us.
Yeah, and there's no by the way, there is no population problem in this world. Forget that. That is ridiculous. We got more than enough resources. In fact, Dan Bongino had us on his show today, and I thought it was a really good show, worth watching. He talked about a study that shows that when population grows, resource usage goes up exponentially. So the more people you have, the more efficient you are. More people is good for an economy and a country, not bad. Lower populations don't get the multiplier effect of for resources.
I was watching an individual, and this goes all the way back to when I was a young man, back, I think it was early 80s, late 70s, something like that. And I believe this when what I was told, but he was talking about how if you were to take, granted the population of the world was smaller at that time, but not that much smaller. He said, if you were to take every single person in the world and stand them next to each other with 2 feet around them in all directions,
you could fit them in Texas.
You could fit them into Jacksonville, Florida.
I guess you did it that close. The analogy I heard most is you could take pretty much everyone in the world, put them in Texas, Louisiana, and Florida. Everybody could have a relatively normal-sized apartment, and the rest of the world would be vacant, and it wouldn't be that crowded. So we do have room, and we do have resources. We just need to be small.
Speaking on resources, here's something that's interesting that kind of goes with the lie and the narrative is the word fossil fuel is actually not accurate. A lot of our fuels do not come from fossils, but also
it's abiotic.
Yeah, but also there's been and from the source I got this from is accurate, and there is documentation somewhere, but a lot of the old barrels that went empty, they went back years later to check on it, and they're actually full again.
Right. The oil is created by the mantle. It's abiotic. It's created by the mantle. You also have water that's created by the mantle too. The earth is an incredible machine. When God created it, he didn't create it to be so fragile that we could mess it up.
Until we got nuclear technology.
Well, Doug's right. I believe that the Lord made the earth to have abundant resources for as long as we are here, until the end of times when Jesus comes back to come get, all the Christians. That is truly what I believe. That we don't have a finite amount of resources. We have an abundant. They're just saying that we are limited for control, so that way they can have the abundance.
Well, and it goes a little further than that. When you have a when you have a society, a laissez-faire market, a free market, what happens too is as the need goes up, as the demand goes up, then we're very good at innovating and meeting those needs. We have done it throughout history. Now, if we destroy innovation, and I think these people know this, then resources become shorthanded. Technology becomes more difficult to handle because you don't have the production and the innovation that you would have in a free market. And so if they get their way, of course there's going to be resource shortages, not because there's not enough resources, but because the political system has ruined the ability to innovate and produce more resources to make them available to the public. I mean, the answer to all of these problems is a free market system.
Yeah, and we do not. And let's just put an end to this ridiculous thing that we do not live under a capitalist system right now. We have not for more than a century and a half. This is a mercantilist system. This is crony capitalism, which is very
right at the good parts. That's when it does that.
very akin to fascism. It's when they were the government and state. That is not. Did I disappear for a second?
Yeah, you froze through about 2/3 of that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, did you get the point that we
do
are not
not live in a capitalist system? We live in a mercantilist system, and that's when it started going anywhere.
Okay. Yeah, we live in a mercantilist system. This is crony capitalism. This is fascism, where the governments and corporations work together to create cartels and monopolies, eliminate competition, and basically seize power and wealth for themselves at the expense of everything else. This is the system the founding fathers came to this country to get away from, and we reinstalled it post Lincoln. Hamilton would have liked to have done it sooner.
Oh,
it's the same kind of system the Constitution was designed to disallow.
Right.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why we're in a post-constitution. We live in a post-constitutional country.
So we need to wrap things up, but let me get this in real quick, and it has to do with the resources and all that stuff. There was people in our side of things reporting this, and I want to see if it's true or not, because I don't think that I don't know where this would be documented that we could find it, but supposedly there's thought that, what was that pipeline that exploded recently? It was Nord Stream.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that Biden bombed it.
Yeah. I believe that's a very, very strong possibility. Yes.
I think it's almost 100% the case.
So, constitutionally, would that be an act of war?
No, you don't need the Constitution to recognize an act of war.
Right, but
it was. Let me back you up a little bit. Act of war, perhaps, but what it really was an act of money.
Go ahead.
I would say it differently. This is more geopolitical strategy to keep. Remember, one thing the Anglo-American alliance has been doing for the last 150 plus years is ensuring that Russia never cooperates with Germany. They cannot have those economic ties be competition for England and America's economic engine. It is a lot. That's what a lot of World War I and World War II were about. You know, there's a reason that British and American Wall Street financiers basically financed the Bolshevik Revolution. It was to keep Russia weak. They created a monster that got out of the bag that wanted international communism. That's why we had to raise up Germany as a bulwark against Russia, or against the Soviet Union, I should say. But that's really what it's all about. It's been geopolitical. And yeah, of course, that's always has to do with the pocketbook as well, but it's also politics. Hey, Andrew, can we go a little bit over tonight? Is there any reason we have to do a cutoff early? You guys have to.
Well, I haven't eaten yet, but yeah.
For those of you who've been watching, I've been munching the whole time. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, right about your electricity, you're eating in front of me. Thanks a lot. No, y'all could go over a little bit longer, but if y'all go as long as you want, I don't care. I do want to say this though. Let's have like a little promotion commercial thing a little bit going on. For one, side note, Christian, feel free to get my information from Brady or Doug. Just because there's some things I'd like to throw your way. And then next week, just in case I get off here soon, next week we'll have a special show. I don't know if Brady and Doug will be joining me. They obviously can, but we're going to have a former 5th Group Special Forces operator on the show. And he is like I said, a former Master Sergeant in the United States Army. His name is Z Durham. Feel free to join the wait list on that. Click notify so it notifies you when to watch. But it's going to be a fantastic show. He is hilarious. He is very knowledgeable. And that show is the show that you'll ask many questions like, okay, how do I more prepare my family? How do I? It's kind of like a community prepper, but he has a lot more, like he can give a different perspective because he is, and I don't know about community prepper, but he is former special forces, and one of their main things to do is to embed with foreign nationals, not so much bushcraft anymore. And from my understanding, there's change in that, but he would understand bushcraft. He would understand how to create a community of other people and get them together to be more self-sufficient, and also to, heaven forbid we were to ever go into civil war, how to create that sort of community. There's lots of information about firearms, about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's a wealth of knowledge, and he's also got some hilarious war stories that maybe if we ask him nicely, maybe he'll share. But I mean, it's going to be a fantastic show. Feel free to watch, invite all your friends. Let's blow this thing off the water, because like I said, he is a wealth of knowledge and he is fantastic. Tracy, the second spelling, Durham, Durham. And his first name is Zee.
Very good. Let's jump back. Oh, real quick before we jump into Twitter files. I should have made this announcement earlier, but everybody, it's official. I have now been baptized for 5 days. Doug was there on the beach last Sunday, and it was a wonderful and very chilly ceremony. Definitely required.
By a lot of people that love you.
A lot of good people. We got a great little tribe here, and it's I say
I'd
like say again.
Isn't San Diego supposed to be hot? Oh yeah, you're in the water too, though.
Yeah, it was
right after some major storms that we got. We don't get these kinds of storms often, but this year we've had some really good ones. And the rough part about storms is everything that was in the gutter and on the street and in people's front yards and backyards, everything else winds up in the storm drain, and then it winds up in the ocean, and then he got baptized in it the next day. So aside from the cold, there was that. But apparently he's not dead yet. So apparently none of the needles made their way through the storm drains and ocean into him. So we're good.
Well, thanks for letting me share that. And Doug, I really do appreciate you being there. Andrew, you would have been invited, but we're one heck of a long drive for you. So maybe.
I will say it was a neat group that was there. It's a lot of people absolutely love you, Brady. And I was very humbled, not only to be there for you, but just because the great people that we had around us and stuff. It was definitely a great experience too.
And pretty much everybody but my mom that was there has been to Doug's class or goes to Doug's class on a regular basis. So, but I bring that up because it's important. I talk to people all around the country, and I tell them about what a great little local tribe I've got around me. And they go, how do you do that? I go, well, with me, a lot of it started with a Constitution class I go to, but there's a lot of ways of doing that. And this is how you build strength and resilience against what may be coming down the pipeline.
Right.
It's great. These people have become the best friends of my life. They're all patriots, God-fearing people, and we're close. I mean, Doug teaches classes all over the state, and he has been for years. And I don't think you've ever seen a group like ours that really came together.
It's definitely a good group. And Community Prepper, I didn't see him in the chat tonight, but when he left Southern California to go back east, he said, "Hey, man, this right now I have more great friends in my life than I've ever had before. It's the best people I've ever had in my life before." And he really was going to miss it, but he needed to move. And I hear that a lot, and I appreciate the fact that I get to be a part of that. and that I'm the common thread. But I tell you what, great people want to turn this thing around, and they all collect at my classes, and so I'm very fortunate that I'm blessed with those kinds of people around me. And so for me, it's a very humbling experience that I get the opportunity to be around such great people.
Agreed. Hey, do you want to? We could wrap up Twitter files here if we jump back into them. We're pretty close to the end.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, back in there. In a crucial in-house Q&A in mid-2017, Roth was asked if it was possible. This is an important one. Is it possible to detect Russian fingerprints using Twitter's public data? Though you can make inferences, he said, in short, no. So all of these people that are identifying all these Russian fingerprints and everything like that were completely full of caca. Twitter therefore knew from the first days of the foreign interference mania that the media zone was flooded with bad actors playing up cyber threats for political or financial reasons, GEC included. Yet they said nothing. GEC has doubled their budget by aggressively overstating threats through unverified accusations that can't be replicated either by external academics or by Twitter. The same is true of New Knowledge. Remember this name. Another group. This is the scandal-plagued company staffed by former NSA officials that led the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, the SSCI, hired to do quote-unquote expert assessments on the initial batches of quote-unquote suspect Facebook and Twitter accounts. I'll go through this and I'm going to give you a little breakdown on SSCI. Well, I'll tell you about this is the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. That's tied into Mark Warner. Who Mark Warner sat on that, and he's one of the most corrupt SOBs that ever lived. He was texting with a Russian oligarch lobbyist by the name who's trying to get in touch with Christopher Steele. The lobbyist's name was Adam Waldman. This is at the heart. The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence was at the heart of the Russiagate investigation. They came out with their report that has been totally debunked at this point. We had a U.S. Senate report that the establishment is still using to this day to claim that they proved Russian interference and collusion with Trump, and it absolutely is false. That's these guys. That's a great deep dive if you want to go into Mark Warner, because that is one piece of work. The same is true of New Knowledge. I just read that. When Twitter saw New Knowledge and its reporter worshipped disinformation gurus like Jonathan Morgan and Rene DiResta, were making analytical leaps they felt were impossible, they knew something was off. But yet they said nothing. After Politico cited a New Knowledge report to the SSCI as evidence for what it called a sweeping effort to sow divisions, Twitter dug in. New Knowledge pointed to 5 supposedly Russian accounts it said were relatively easy to find within the Twitter public API. Roth scoffed. Roth said 2 of the 5 accounts were a small Indonesian content farm, just commercial spam. And Becca, as an account, is an American, not at all suspicious. So to sum that up, what Taibbi's saying is, yeah, these quasi-government agencies giving fake reports to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, who are incorporating them into, this is the highest ranking Senate committee. You don't get on that unless you're corrupt, right? Marco Rubio, he's on it. Go look at the SSCI right now and look who's on it, and look at who's been on it historically. Every single one of these people are swamp creatures. You do not get on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence unless you are corrupt. The guy who does some great work on that is Sundance at the Conservative Treehouse. He's been documenting this for years, and I've been following him, and his research checks out. Any comments before I go on?
Not so far. Go ahead.
Twitter's Nick Pickles. Great name. Hi, I'm Nick Pickles. That would be a tough way to go through life.
Yeah, it's almost as good as Anthony Weiner. But anyway, go ahead.
New Knowledge's pitch. Pick accounts that they have deemed to be IRA controlled. That's Internet Research Agency, which is the Russian troll farm, supposedly. And then spin up bigger macro analysis. Stories about 2,000 Russian accounts tweeting about Kavanaugh, Walkaway, Caravan were often based on media activity from New Knowledge. They were basically playing the public opinion, and these organic movements like the Walkaway movement were getting stymied because of the accusations of being Russian disinformation. And people bought it hook, line, and sinker, and they are still buying it today. Just like Hamilton 68, GEC and New Knowledge littered the media landscape with flawed or flat-out wrong news stories, exacerbating matters. Americans in both cases paid taxes to become the subject of these manipulative operations. If you guys want to have some fun, look up these organizations, these other NGOs that are affiliated, including some of the election type agencies, and follow the money. Go look at who financed them. You know, you're going to see a lot of times, a lot of George Soros Open Society stuff. You're going to see other Clinton CGI type connections, but just go follow the money. I mean, that's how you uncover all of this stuff. Sounds like Andrew's getting some food.
Well, I was, but now I'm not. Everything's still packed, even in the other area where I'm at. I'm like starting to get hangry.
Hangry.
That's a good one.
And I'm not a fun person to be around whenever I'm hangry. I get really.
All right, we're almost done with this, and then we'll let you go beg for some food.
Well, it's going to be a while yet because I'm driving back to Pleasant View. So carry on.
All right, good. We can have a long show. Particularly egregious. A new Knowledge report to the Senate on Russian interference was leaked just days before it was outed in a scheme to fake Russian influence in an Alabama election, and no media outlets issued retractions. No SSCI staff have commented either. So you guys all remember the Alabama election when they were claiming Russian interference?
Hey, I'll be right back. Y'all keep going. I'll be right back.
Keep going.
Yeah, that was a load of caca too. I guess caca is my new word for the night. It keeps popping into my head. Sorry about that. I'm trying not to use profanity. Although if you use profanity in a different language, is it still profanity? Foreign cyber threats exist, and there are sophisticated ways of detecting them. But GEC and its subcontractors don't use those, instead deploying junk science that often lumps true bad actors in with organic opinion. Disinformation studies, air quotes, has mostly become a con, where non-experts mesmerize reporters with what one former GEC staffer calls hairball charts, measuring something idiotic, like who follows 2 Chinese diplomats or shares an Iranian Free Palestine move. I wanted to pull this up. This is basically how they prove all this foreign interference. Just tying a bunch of strings together on a wall like a detective. And it is all based on BS with very little truth behind it. The Washington Examiner and G.E. Kaminsky just profiled a GEC-funded NGO in the UK that algorithmically scores media outlets by risk. How does downranking the Daily Wire to help the New York Times get more ad revenue counter foreign disinformation? So this is the monetary aspect. I thought Doug would find that interesting. They're basically creating fake risk profiles to direct traffic towards favored sites versus ones that don't agree with them politically. And yeah, I think that's probably, well, yeah, here's my question for you. Do you think that's something that these outlet like the Daily Wire could take this information and use that to sue? I mean, there's actually economic damage being done here. Is that a way to shut these things down?
Yeah, that might be. Yeah, I haven't really thought about it. That's an interesting angle.
Well, I've been thinking along those lines for quite a while lately. Mostly because it's become pretty obvious that we've got an awful lot of corruption and shenanigans have been exposed, and yet there's no institution in America that's got either the power or the will to do anything about it. And,
Right.
and it should fall to the states. But the one case that nobody's talking enough about is that Missouri versus Biden case, where they're actually using the courts to go after the government, and they're getting all these subpoenas and depositions of how. So, the court. Every time you go to court, you're playing judge roulette. You get a bad judge. Your case is gone, and hopefully you can beat it at appeals, but that costs money. So, I think maybe the way to take down these organizations is possibly through good state attorney generals, and there are some. Using the court system and hopefully getting the right judges and getting this stuff really exposed, because the federal government isn't going to police itself. I mean, it's all in on its power grab, and the corruption goes all the way down to the local level. So there really is no institution that we have on our side, the side of
Right.
truth.
Well, and what's interesting is while there's a handful of critters that are on the inside that might be on our side, might be allies. It's like I tell people when they ask me, "Well, why don't you run for office?" And because you ought to be in Congress. Well, if I go to Congress, I'm one of 535 people, not very impactful. If there's going to be a change, if there's going to be hope, it's not going to happen from within Congress or from within the government. It's going to happen from influencers like you and I and other people who are able to impact it from another angle. And I tell people all the time that we got to remember that sometimes you got to think outside the box. Sometimes something seems helpless or hopeless, and the way to fix it, the solution, is at our fingertips, and we don't even realize it. One of my favorite stories to tell, and I think I told this to someone last night, a visitor we had from the Torrance, the Republican women's group, was there's a story about, and I know you've heard this, but everybody in the audience might not have. There's a story about how at this football game, this particular school, the cheerleaders on the banner that the football players would bust through would always write a Bible verse on that banner. One parent complained that Separation Church and State can't have a verse on the banner. So the cheerleaders were asked to stop putting a Bible verse on that banner that the football team broke through. The parents were very upset, didn't know what to do. Next football game, when the football players came busting through the banner, all of the parents had written a Bible verse on a smaller banner that they would hold up, and they all stood up all at once in the stands and held them up. And if you looked at the stands, it was almost completely covered in various Bible verses. It's an incredible story because it shows that the answer sometimes is not what you expect, and sometimes it's more powerful than what you were doing before. We just have to, as people on the outside, understand that's what it's going to take, is something like that. Because while I appreciate the critters on the inside that are trying to do the good work, and we can, Jim Jordan or whoever, whether or not they've got both feet in the Constitution or both feet in the in the rot or some variation thereof, the fact is, even if you've got a great one, they are just one of many, and we're not going to change it from inside that. We're going to have to do it ourselves.
Believe it or not, I think that's the first time I heard that story. That's a good
really?
one.
Oh.
Yeah, you guys got to understand that Doug and I we talk an awful lot and do a lot of shows together. And sometimes it means I get to hear all of his stories about 6 or 7 times, and I have to act like I'm still interested the 7th time. When he tells me, and no, he's got all these great anecdotes and stories, but he does repeat them in different classes, and it's hard to keep track of. And of course, since I'm involved with so much of it, I hear it often. But I think that was a new one to me, and it was a good story.
Right on.
Another question on that subject before we wrap up is on the Twitter files is we've got 7 states where you can actually assemble citizens' grand juries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is it perhaps time we start taking advantage of that? And why aren't we doing so?
And there's also something called a civil grand jury, which we do have in California. And civil grand juries, while they are an official state operation, they have the authority to investigate and present their findings to the courts. And so civil grand juries and citizen grand juries are both very valuable tools, and we aren't taking advantage of them. We should have them in every state.
That's something I want to take a deeper look into this year. And we'll let's circle back. Excuse me for saying circle back. Let's get back to that sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things that, and I think I touched on this early on in this program, is that if you go back to Article 1, Section 8, remember it says that the Congress can call up the militia to execute the laws of the Union. These agencies, as I mentioned earlier on the show, are not supposed to be policing us or executing federal law against us. That is something, first of all, federal laws not supposed to be internal very much anyway. There's very few authorities internally that the federal government has. But then it's supposed to fall on the shoulders of the militia. When I say militia, you say state defense force, you can say community committees of safety, or whatever you want to call them. But here's the sad part about it. We have literally let that go. only 24 states still have state militias. All of them should. And while we're at it, we should also, have other things in place, such as, the citizen grand juries, the civil grand juries, such as committees of safety, petitioning. I have a chapter in my book, Repeal Democracy, where I talk about the importance of petitioning and how it used to be used regularly. And these are not things that they took away from us. These are things we stopped doing. It's nobody's fault but our own. And they're valuable tools. We need to get back to that. And I do as much as I can, but I'm only one person. And I'm very proud of people that are in other states, Stephanie being one of them there in Michigan, who have gotten involved. They've gotten positions in something. They're making things happen. And we need to do that, because it's not going to, because once again, this is something that Brady has said. We're not going to change it from the top down. It's going to happen from the bottom up. And that's us, grassroots. And people say, well, gosh, Doug, what do we do? Or gosh, there's nothing we can do. They're so powerful. There's always something to do. It goes back to my story about the Bible verse. There's something there. We haven't figured it out yet, but you know what? It's there. And we need to put it in action once we figure it out. But we need to be educated. That's why I'm an educator. That's why I want you to know this stuff. Because once you learn this stuff, the solutions begin to present themselves.
Very good stuff, Doug.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, I love it when you talk about that particular topic. What the heck can we do about it? All right. The Washington Examiner and G.A. Kaminsky just profiled a GEC-funded NGO in the United Kingdom that algorithmically, we just talked about that, the Daily Wire. An Inspector General report shows GEC was initially obligated $98.7 million, of which roughly $80 million came from the Pentagon. So this is the Defense Department paying for this stuff. Our military is working against us domestically. That's the implication there. Just let that sink in. It reportedly gave to at least 39 different organizations whose names were redacted. Why is this list secret? I want to get a hold of this list.
All right, I'm back.
All right.
Yeah, I could hear all the noise.
What noise is that?
The wind drag from your window preceded your voice. Welcome back.
Yeah, I without telling everybody my business, I had to say goodnight. Well, not had to. I said goodnight to my wife and prayed with her, and now I'm back.
Very good. Hope she's doing well.
She's doing as well as she can in the circumstances. Luckily, the Lord gives us strength when needed and wisdom when needed. And, it's a process, and it will work out when it works out, and it'll be fine.
Very good. So just wrapping up here, I've got a few more tweets to get through. Twitter comms official Ian Plunkett wrote years ago that misinformation like countering violent extremism, or CVE, before is becoming a cottage industry. Disinformation is the counterterrorism mission, rebranded for domestic targets, which basically means us. Reauthorization for the GEC's funding is up for votes. That's one I'm going to have to track down when that vote is coming up, and maybe we can get a plan of action to get on a letter writing campaign to Congress, because I'd like to see these guys defunded.
Who defunded? You kind of cut out a little bit.
And you're suddenly louder.
Am I louder?
Oh yeah, you sound really good right now.
Well, thank you. I've been working out,
and now you're able to, put your, now you're able to project your voice, right?
Well, I work out now, so.
We should all be working out. Makes you strong in body and spirit for what's to come.
I work out all the time. I do curls with my Dr. Pepper cans. I run to the toilet. I work out a lot.
So hold on. Do you call your toilet the gym so you can tell people you go to the gym multiple times a day?
Yeah, that's a good idea. I might steal that.
Thank you. One of my goals throughout the show, at least every week, is to make Doug laugh
Well,
because it's genuine whenever you laugh.
mission accomplished.
Question is-
Christian,
the
Mr. Pibb. Yeah, I'm willing to drink Mr. Pibb, but it's not Dr. Pepper. Christian, by the way, gave me a false prophet image today. It says, beware of false prophets. And it was a picture of a whole bunch of Dr. Pepper wannabes.
I can't believe there are that many. It's amazing. It's amazing. Which actually open up a conversation into monopolies, but I don't want to do that. We don't have time for that tonight.
Yeah, and my wife just tried to call me, which means she's on her way home. So I've got about 5 or 10 minutes.
All right, let's wrap this up. We're almost done. Matt Taibbi gives his disclaimer that Twitter files are prepared by a third party, so material may have been left out. Thanks to Schellenberger, who is a Californian, and the team at Racket News, who will have more on this all month, so there's more to come. And if Michael Schellenberger is reporting on it, it should be good. I am a fan of his work. Just before publication, Graham Brookie of DFR Lab wrote to clarify about the 40,000 Indian names. He says, we didn't publish this from a former researcher because we lacked confidence in its findings. Very good. At least some integrity going on. I asked Brookie if he'd made this lack of confidence clear to the Reuters reporter whose story based on that research is still live and uncorrected. He has not replied. So it's one thing to know this stuff is false and another to sit on that information and let others run with it. You know, you're kind of obligated to me if you're a reporter and you know that people are using false information. You got to shout it out. And Twitter had an obligation and failed. They knew that this is bunk. But that's it. That's the thread.
All right. And as the audience may have noticed, the other dog wanted to get in my lap. He can't jump up, though. I had to get him. He's too fat. But
I was going to ask you, I mentioned Wag the dog, and it was literally just seconds before Petey jumped in your lap. So
yeah, one wonders.
Is his English getting better?
Yeah. My dogs are actually the brown one, Link, and the white one is Petey. Link, actually, he understands English very, very well. What he'll do is he'll look at me, and then I'll start asking him questions, and he'll just keep looking at me till I ask the right question. Then he'll get all excited. So that way, and that's how he communicates with me. So I'm like, you hungry? You want some water? Want to go outside? That's it. You know, he's all, yeah. But yeah, it's kind of funny. And then Petey, the white one, he's a follower. So he just, Virginia calls him Princess because he's, you know, such a little wimpy little foo-foo dog. But anyway, it's been a pleasure being a part of this. You did do most of the talking and reading and all that, but you know, you brought up some very good things. And while I did not have, Dr. Thunder, I used to drink Dr. Thunder for a while. Then I started making more money and went back to Dr. Pepper. But anyway, Christian in the chat room. But anyway, do appreciate the fact that you kind of took the lead tonight. And you know, sometimes you'll notice, folks, that sometimes Andrew does a lot of talking. Sometimes I do. Sometimes the War Hamster Brady does. And this was definitely interesting stuff. I'm glad that I had the opportunity to kind of throw a few constitutional stuff in there. But folks, for the time being, we do this show every Friday. So definitely remember to show up every Friday, but do something else too, because Andrew, this is Andrew's channel. And while Constitutional Roundtable is a fun show and we get into some very good topics, and it's also great training ground for Brady and I as we get ready we're on the verge of doing some other things together, and we'll let you know when that happens. Andrew has other people on this show every once in a while. He has other episodes. He doesn't just host these Constitutional Roundtable shows. So hit the like button, subscriber button, should I say? Subscribe. Hit the thumbs up. You know, hit the bell when you subscribe. And I said last episode there were 98 subscribers, and I said this week I wanted there to be at least 100. When I said that last week, by the end of the show, there were 100. Now we're 103 subscribers. And this is not just good for Brady and I. This is good for Andrew. And Andrew, like I said, he has some very interesting guests sometimes with his other shows. And so I encourage you to subscribe and support Andrew as he works to grow, and follow what Brady and I do. I'll plug myself real quick, and I'll let Brady plug his. DouglasVGibbs.com, politicalpistachio.com, YouTube.com/DouglasVGibbs, Rumble.com/DouglasVGibbs, BitChute.com/DouglasVGibbs, and Brighteon.com/channels/ you got it, Douglas V. Gibbs. And also I'm all over other places on Tuesdays at 3:00, MrConstitution.com. That's Mr. with a hyphen, Constitution.com. And if you want to be on my email list, go to DouglasVGibbs.com or politicalpistachio.com. Find the join the email list button, click that. And if you want to help what I do financially, because I'm always funding things, radio shows included, you can, right now it's PayPal. I'm getting ready to also move over to something else even for that. But right now it's still PayPal. So DouglasVGibbs.com, politicalpistachio.com, hit the donate button. All right, that's all for me. How about you, Mr. Hamster?
Well, I've got some fun announcements in terms of promoting myself. My new channel is now up. I don't have the new. I'm trying to get the new content up over the next 3 days. But if you go to Rumble and you look for Brady Fox, that's with 2 X's, you'll find my channel. Please subscribe. You'll see some of my older material showing up over the weekend, and the new material will come up last. I did a presentation I'm very, very proud of a couple weeks ago, and I've got some really fun interviews lined up over the next couple of weeks. I am also hoping to have my first Substack article published as early as Monday, and I guess I'll have to give you guys the link on that next week, because I still haven't decided which name I'm going to go with on that. But the article will be basically an outline of the Brady Amendment, which we've talked about here on this show, and I've got several other articles in the pipeline. So the War Hamster channels are going to slowly fade away in the past, slowly fade away. The new channel is going to have a lot more new content with more of a professional approach and aimed at a more professional audience, less joking around, because it's time to get some other people to wake up. Previously a lot of my subscribers were people that already agreed with me. My goal is to go out there and change some minds and wake people up. So that's but please check out the Brady Fox Rumble channel. You'll see some new stuff coming up, and it makes
and that still has a War Hamster image on it.
It does, because you can't kill.
I just hit follow. I hope everybody else will too.
Yeah, we can't kill off the hamster altogether. In fact, I've even worked out how I'm going to introduce myself on my solo stuff.
Now, I did notice there's a second Brady Fox with no space between the names. That's not you.
I don't think so. If it doesn't have a hamster, it isn't. I didn't see one on there.
Anyways, it's just a blue circle with a B in it, and it's an inactive account. But nonetheless, I just want to make sure.
I got another mini me. There's other. Someone told me there's a battle hamster out there on Twitter now. I can't have that. Anyways, I've got a new sign off. Oh, there's Andrew. I'll wait for him.
Yeah. Hey, now I'm gonna start looking for Blood Hamster and Radical Hamster.
Yeah, I've got a few mini me's out there. So my new sign off, everybody, is thanks for being on the show, and Medga, make the enumeration doctrine great again.
All right. Anything else, Andrew? Now, while you were kind of, I don't know if you were eating, ordering, or what, but I kind of plugged your channel and told people want subscribers, and it was at 103 at the beginning of the show. I have a feeling we may have picked up a few more.
Let's see
but what you do is good. With your guests and stuff is very good too. So
105.
105 now. Andrew, are you there?
I see him.
Yeah, we see the picture, but I don't know if he's fully with us. But anyway, that's interesting. You did that a few times during the show, by the way. Now that said, also remember, what I do at YouTube and Rumble and all that. I would love for you to follow me too. But I've got a few more followers. I'm up there close to 2,000 on one of my pages, 1,000 on another. But I've been doing it longer too, and that's a part of it. Now that said, while we're waiting for Andrew to kind of reappear, let me say this real quick. Brady and I have been working on updating our national presence online, and we had a meeting today that involved that, and we are moving in a very, very good direction. So be on the lookout over the next few months. I'm gonna be updating my website. He and I have a new thing that we're gonna be together. Constitution Restoration Society, the Constitution Association nonprofit's gonna have kind of a new look to it, and we're really gonna be endeavoring to get new projects going, deeper educational opportunities out there for people, make what we're doing more interactive. So it's kind of fun. We're in a growth process right now, and I think in the next few months it's going to get very, very interesting. And so Brady's grinning. So because I don't want to give away too much, because it's like telling the end of a the end of a movie. But at the same time, I want to tell enough that people are jazzed.
Well, the funny thing is, Doug hasn't seen all the toys that I have. You know, 'cause I've been helping on building out the entire company up in the infrastructure, but
Yeah.
I've seen some more of the toys, and you're gonna be.
I just saw some of the toys today.
Yeah, you're gonna be like a little kid at Christmas when we're all done. You'll be very happy.
Right. Very good.
And I think the quality of the production is going to go up. I think our ability to reach more people is going to go up, and I think the quality, our content's great, and we're just going to get better at delivering it. And
also there's going to be different types of content more available. One of the things that I'm working on is to try to make my part of my website a more of an interactive educational experience, not just this is who Doug is. I want you to be able to go there and say, gosh, I wonder what this is, or has Doug done a video on that, and really be able to, find this stuff and educate yourself. And I also want it to be, and you are going to get a crack up out of this. I want it to be like the Carlsbad class. I want a tight community on my website. I want it to get where people are going there for the fellowship and for to lean on each other and learn from each other and get active and into advocacy and activism or whatnot. So that's my goal anyway. And it's all the Carlsbad class's fault for creating such a fantastic model for me to try to follow.
We sort of have that in the 3 shows we're doing regularly right now, this one included. We got some pretty regular people in the chat room, and they've got it's a fun little community.
Chris L and Tracy on the chat, being a couple of them that I see right now.
Yeah, I enjoy. Of course, we enjoy the interaction with the chat, because we got without patting ourselves on the back too much, we've got a pretty intelligent set of people that follow our channels, stuff like that. So it makes it nice. You don't.
Yeah, it's funny because when I invite speakers or people to participate in some of the things I'm a part of, and one of the first things I get from them, and last night, matter of fact, we had a young lady that joined the class for the first time, and she's like, "Wow, you got some really well-informed people around you," and I can maybe take a little bit of credit for that, but no, it's because right now we have such great Americans that are coming together. And I just so happen to be one of those hubs that they're kind of surrounding, and I'm excited to be a part of that. But there's a lot of people in America that really know what they're, really know their stuff and are informed and active and looking forward to really doing some stuff. And we're just very fortunate that they're in our chat rooms and at my Constitution classes.
Yes, and I think one of the best services we've been providing lately in the truth movement is not falling for the falsehoods, because there's a lot of fake stories out there. And I bring that up because we didn't get a chance to get into it, but that story coming out of John Thaler out of Arizona, I'm advising everybody be very cautious on that story. There's an awful lot of red flags with that guy, and the evidence that I've seen thus far does not have me convinced that he's anything but a raving lunatic. The accusations and allegations are very serious, and perhaps there is something to him. We know there are shenanigans in Arizona involving the cartels. I just don't know that this is the guy to prove it. And it kind of makes the whole truth movement look bad when you run with stories that are demonstrably false. So proceed with caution on that story out of Arizona. It sounded explosive. I brought it up on the Sunday show with a bit of caution. I go, this is what we know so far. I've looked into it further since then. Doug and I are doing the Sunday show without Alan. At 5:00 on Sunday on Patriot Soapbox. That is one of the topics I want to do a deep dive in. Tracy Beans, who's one of my favorite independent journalists, has broken this down quite a bit, and I want to go over some of her thoughts and opinions. But that'll be interesting. it's a big story in certain corners of the internet, and I think it's time. I think we could do a pretty good service of getting the best version of the truth out there.
For those of you who are curious about that Sunday show from 5 to 7 Pacific on Patriot Soapbox, best way to watch it is dlive.tv/PSB, which stands for Patriot Soapbox. dlive.tv/PSB.
Well, I think it's time for you to take us home.
All right. United we stand. Combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. Thank you for spending the time with us, and we'll see you next time right here on the Constitutional Roundtable and all over the place where we have an opportunity to talk to you. Thank you for spending the time with us and taking time out of your busy day to learn the truth. We'll see you next time.
Cheers, everyone.